Hello, this is the lecture on morphology. It is not like the last year morphology. Last year you studied morphology of English, and here we have the general linguistics. It is the introduction to linguistics, so morphology will be tackled differently. It deals with the morphology of different languages in terms of linguistic studies and description. So morphology here is about different languages and different morphological processes used in different languages. So first let's start to define morphology. What is morphology in the first place? What is the term morphology in the first place? So morphology has been used for a long time in biology. It deals with the forms of biological aspects. It is the science of forms. However, within the passage of time, within the advancement of linguistic studies, it becomes a term which refers to the study of forms of language. What are the forms of language? Of course, forms that represent language or represent chunks of language, chunks of or part of sentences, are the words, of course. So the study of these words, the structure of these words, how they are formed and structured, is the responsibility of morphology, or it is the area where words are studied and investigated. The structure of words, the forms of words are studied and investigated. So morphology in simple words refers to the study of how words are created in a language. Created here, originated, formed and structured. Originated, formed and or structured. So generally speaking, how words are structured or how words are created, we can have two mostly significant processes, which are the inflection and derivation. Within the derivation process, which is the umbrella term in the word formation, we have different processes, and within the inflection we have again different processes. Now in the word formation, derivation was tackled in the last chapter, if you remember. It was tackled as one process of obtaining words. One process of obtaining words. Here derivation is a process which is involved in creating the structures of words. Now we have to distinguish between the etymology of words, the processes where we get words from, and the processes where we derive words. Now one of these processes is derivation, and the second is inflection, and accordingly we will have the unit of dealing with the morphology. Now what is the unit when dealing with morphology, when studying the structure of words? What is the unit that we have to study? What is the unit that according to which we measure or we put our measurements on in terms of morphology? Now, so first, what are the inflection and word formation? What are the inflection and word formation? Inflection, of course, is a process which refers to the change in the base form of a word, root or stem. A root or a stem. Now the word. So the inflection, as we said, refers to the change in the base. the root or the stem. So what is the root of the word? The root of the word, or the base or the stem of the word, represents the form of the word without any addition, any suffixes, any affixes, any inflections. So when having any inflection or modification in the meaning, in terms of, for example, plurality, making adjectives, making verbs, making nouns, and so on and so forth. So here we have the inflections. Now, what type of inflections are these? We cannot study them without examples. Let's have these examples. For example, apple, having this s of plural, making it a plural noun. Now this is an inflection. This is an inflection. It is just like the al-harakat in the Arabic language. Now, putting this inflection, it will make the noun apple from singular. It will change it from singular into a plural. Now, the same with house. Putting this s, taking into consideration the phonological adjustments, it will make it houses. Okay, plural. The adjective sad, it will be sadder or saddest. Big, bigger, biggest. Now these er or est, the comparative and superlative degrees of comparison, are inflections. Of course, these inflections of the English language. Learn as a verb, learned, the tense, which is the past, or learning, the present or progressive aspect of the verb. So the ed and ing are also represent the inflections. Now these and other inflections, they are 9 in number. You have studied them in English in the last year. They are 9 in number. They cannot do things where the derivational process can do. We will tackle them in the differences between inflection and derivation processes. Now this is the inflection as a process. Now back to our question, what is the unit of studying morphology? What is the unit where we can study morphology with? Now, is it a phoneme, a grapheme, or something else? Of course, a phoneme, as we said previously, deals with the phonology of a language. Grapheme deals with the graphology of a language. Now, what about morphology? Of course, there must be some unit, and this unit is called morpheme. Now, what is morpheme? Of course, the morpheme is the unit with which we can study the morphology of words. I mean, the structure and the way how words are formed. Simply speaking, the morpheme, as introduced in your textbook, is the minimal unit of a word. The minimal unit of the word of a word. The minimal unit of a word. So, what is the minimal unit of a word? It is minimal. It is the smallest part. We cannot divide it into smaller units, because dividing it into smaller units will give no words and no morphemes, so will lead us to nowhere. And this is how this is the way we can study forms of words, through having the smallest significant or meaningful unit. And the smallest significant meaningful unit in terms of morphology is the morpheme. Of course, it is a morph. We will study it later. It is a morph, exactly, but this "im" represents the abstract, or the abstraction which is in the mind. Now, if we talk about this "im," the abstraction in the mind, we will deal with the abstract and concrete aspects or features of the morpheme. Now, if we talk about, for example, the morpheme in the English language, the morpheme that represent the plurality, which is S of plural. Now it is not only S of the plural. In our mind it is S, yes, it is S of the plural, but in fact it is not only S. In the actual representation it is S, Z, is, En, for example, E, man, E again of man, E from women, and so on and so forth. So many irregular plurals. All of these are under the umbrella of S plural, which is abstract in mind, and these are the allomorphs. We will deal with them later on. Now, of course, morpheme has different classifications and different types according to these different classifications. Now let's start with the classification that depends on the form of the morpheme. The classification which depends on the form or the formal classification of the morpheme has two morphemes, free morphemes, and two types of morphemes, free and bound, free morphemes and bound morphemes, while the functional classification, which depends on the function of the morpheme, we have the lexical, functional, derivational, and inflectional. All of these depends on the lexical, functional classification of the morpheme. Let's start with the formal classification of the morpheme. They're easy. I'm quite sure that they're easy because you have studied them previously, and you did study them in the last year. So free morphemes are the morphemes that can stand by themselves, that can stand alone as single words. Morphemes, the free morphemes, they are free, they can stand alone without any addition, without the need to any addition or any sophistication or any suffixes and affixes added or attached or bound to them. They are free, they can stand alone. They are words alone, like the word open, the word tour, teach, you, me, I, and so on and so forth, Ahmed, Hussein, Muhammad, and so on and so forth. So all of these are words. Once these words are added or have taken the attachment, we will have the other type of the morpheme, which is the bound morpheme. So what are the bound morphemes? The bound morphemes are those that are attached to a free morpheme, or to have in order to have a kind of meaning. So the bound morpheme, it is the attachments that are attached to the free morpheme. What are these attachments or additions? Okay, they are the affixes, and these affixes, simply speaking, are the prefixes, suffixes, and infixes, as we have studied in the previous chapter. Prefixes are the additions that come before the words. Suffixes are the addition that come at the end of the word, and infixes, which come within or in the middle of the words. Now here are the examples. For example, an, dress, dressed. This an is the prefix. Dress is the stem or base of the word, and ed, it is the inflectional, it is the suffix. Now carelessness, of course, care is the base, less and ness are the suffixes, which are bound to the free morpheme. So here dress is the free morpheme, un and ed are not, they are the bound morphemes. Care is the free morpheme, less and ness are the bound morpheme. Reduce, receive, and repeat. Reduce, receive, and are irregular morphemes, because they are combined from two bound stems. There is no one bound and one free. They are both bound. Read, juice, receive, and repeat. They are both re and peat, re and sieve, re and juice are both bound morphemes. These are exceptions. Well, that's it for this lecture. Next lecture we'll go on with the other type, or the other classification of the morphemes, which is the functional classification. We'll talk about the inflection process and the derivational process altogether, and how we can derive and inflect words, and we'll talk about the differences between inflections and derivations. Thank you very much. That's all from me. Thank you.